You're listening to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health.
It only takes one step, twist, or crunch to know something doesn't feel right. Essentia Health's orthopedic and sports medicine team gets you back to doing what you love with commitment, resilience, intention. We're here to keep you moving forward. Visit essentiahealth.org to learn more about orthopedics and sports medicine, like nowhere else.
Hello and welcome to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health. I'm Matt Wellens, the Bulldogs hockey beat writer at the Duluth News Tribune and the Rink Live.
And I'm Zach Schneider, the television voice of UMD Hockey on My 9 Sports.
Welcome to part one of the two-episode season 5 finale of the Bulldog Insider Podcast. Joining us for the next 2 episodes to help us wrap up the 2022-23 men's and women's hockey seasons, as well as look ahead to the 2023-24 season. It's the voice of Bulldogs hockey on KDAL. It's Bruce Ciskie. Hi, Bruce.
The one guy that they wish would enter the transfer portal will not.
Yeah, speaking of transfer portal.
Good segue.
Thank you.
So y'all remember last season when we recorded this season-ending podcast, and then I think we had to throw like a disclaimer on it because literally like an hour or two afterward, Connor Kelly entered the portal. Well, we lucked out this time. I'm trying to find the bright side of this one. We lucked out this time. Big splash into the transfer portal for the UMD men. Isaac Howard, the first-round draft pick of the Tampa Bay Lightning, is leaving the Bulldogs after one season to enter the transfer portal. And we're going to address that in episode 2 for 2 reasons. We're recording this on Thursday, March 23rd.
Very good.
Thank you, Apple Watch, for telling me what day it is. We're recording this on Thursday, March 23rd. Might as well give the time. We were supposed to start at noon. We're now at 12:26. So this is the time reference for everyone as you're listening to this. By the time you're listening to this, Isaac Howard maybe already has a new destination.
I'd bet that actually is the case.
That's very well the case. So heck, maybe in the short time we have while we're recording episode 1, Isaac Howard will have a new destination by the time we start recording part 2 of this. Later this afternoon. So we are going to get to the Isaac Howard thing. We're still processing it. Hopefully nothing else happens. It's the one time Wyatt allows me to knock on the table during this podcast. Well, hopefully nothing else happens during this podcast, but that's the time frame. We're recording this ahead of time. We're not a live podcast. We're never going to be a live podcast because if we had been, I would have just been swearing on the air to start this one.
Is a live podcast still a podcast?
That's a radio show, I think.
I think that we've crossed the line into a radio show, and I do that every day.
Is a podcast really a podcast if you're not listening to it on an iPod? All right, we're not going to get theoretical in this. We've already gone off the tangent. We've lost the wheels. Thank you, Isaac Howard, for doing that. Blaming it all on that kid. Nice kid. Okay, we'll get into Isaac Howard in episode 2. So check that one in your podcast feed. All right, so back in December, we had Bruce on the podcast with Zach and I. We did a first half recap. That's episode 12. If you really want to go back and listen to that one. We're also optimistic, if I remember right, back in
painfully optimistic
in December. Terribly optimistic.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring back some of those questions, and we're going to do like we did last time, alternating between the men and the women. Let's start with expectations. If teams met their expectations this year, we'll start with the men. They finished 16-20-1 and 5th in the NCHC. Their season ended in Game 3 of an NCHC quarterfinal series at St. Cloud State. Did the men meet your expectations, exceed them, or did they underperform in 2022-2023? Bruce, we're going to let you start.
Well, even if I were to say that I expected them to not get home ice again, I still don't think they met my expectations. And I would say that because there was improvement throughout the year, yes, but I did not see any major steps in terms of the consistency of that improvement from weekend to weekend. No better example than the St. Cloud weekend here. They score 11 goals. They sweep the series. They looked great. They did a lot of things well in their transition game, playing defensively. Scott's talked about, against that team especially, avoiding odd man rushes. They gave up maybe 2 all weekend here against St. Cloud State. And then they turn around against Western Michigan and get 1 point out of 6 and mostly don't play very well. And to me, that was the moment where you're like, okay, it is what it is. It's not going to be a banner year for this team. And I would have to say, yeah, they did not meet expectations. They didn't get better. They got better. They just didn't get better enough, I don't think.
Zach, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that sums it up well, and I think I said this in the midseason review too, is if you throw out a couple games from the first half specifically, maybe you're talking about it in a slightly different light, but those games kept happening into the second half. Maybe most notably for me was the home finale against Miami, which was a very lackluster performance in what at that point was going to be for sure the last game that the team played this season, that a couple guys played in that building. They had already been locked into going on the road to somewhere, and they did not have much fight that night, and that kind of sticks out, as you go into the second half with a team that we wanted to be optimistic about, and just when they had the opportunities in front of them, did not take advantage of them, which is very un-Bulldogs-like, has been over the last several seasons, and so hopefully it's something that the younger guys can learn from and get better, but I think anybody who's being realistic about this season has to say they underperformed.
Yeah, and I think, Scott said it to me at the end of the season there. He called it unacceptable, that you can't accept the result that they had this season. Fifth in the NCH. It's weird how, like, last year, fifth in the NCHC felt entirely different than fifth in the NCHC this year. Like, I don't think the league was just so much better last year, and it can be tough to grade a team just on where their standing is. You just had that feeling. I think Bruce summed it up. You just had that feeling at some point, like, they are who they are, and it's just not going to get better. Like, I thought maybe after they swept St. Cloud State, and I get the Huskies were in a bad spot then. They were trying to figure out how to play without Dylan Anhorn that first weekend there. But you thought maybe that was going to turn it around. And it just never built from there. This team just never could gain momentum, and I don't know if there's any one area you can necessarily blame. I do think we maybe put too much stock in some of the veterans who had been role players for 3 to 4 years, not first line, second line, maybe even third line players. I do think Blake Biondi, being gone for the second half had a big impact. That was someone who you expected to be a top line player. I have a hard time evaluating his season, how much his struggles in the first half had to do with playing through the left shoulder injury. I mean, I've heard people say, no, that didn't impact him, but I'm sorry, when your doctor tells you got to go have shoulder surgery, something was wrong with it, and that's going to impact a player. So things just didn't click. We didn't see, whether it's sophomores or juniors, rise, take their game to another level. I thought the young players, the freshmen, did get better as the season went along. Ben Steeves was definitely I don't want to call it a surprise. Like, there's a player that I think kind of lived up to expectations if you're going through the roster, though you would have liked to see more 5-on-5. But the line, everything just didn't click on this team. Things just didn't seem to click. And now we have Isaac Howard, again, a player who I thought improved greatly from start to finish, became a more well-rounded player, said all the right things. I thought he did all the right things, at least from the outside when you're looking and talking to people. But when you see a guy like that decide to move on, it does beg to question. Things just didn't seem to click. And I think that's what we have some questions coming up in episode 2 about the inconsistencies, but the clicking part, it's just things didn't click this year for them. I
remember talking to coaches, and one of the things I do every week is I talk to the coach of the other team. There's 2 teams playing in the game. We're going to tell both stories. And I would ask them about playing UMD, and it didn't matter if it was Brett Larson, David Carl, or Brad Berry. They all said the same things. If this is a team that plays, you watch them play, and they're dominating games. Brett said they're dominating games for 57 minutes, and then those 3 minutes happen. What happens in St. Cloud in Game 3? They control a good chunk of the pace of the first period. They get out of it 0-0, good road period. Then the second period, they score 38 seconds into the period. They get a couple of good shifts after that, and then spend 10 minutes in their zone. And that cost them the game. That was the game. Those 10 minutes they spent in their defensive zone because they didn't play well in those 10 minutes. And it wasn't even full games sometimes. It was 3 minutes here, 5 minutes here, one shift here. But they kept happening. And when they keep happening, that becomes part of who you are, right? It is what it is. They are who they are, as we said.
Yeah, and that's, I said that the Miami game before that, a couple weekends before that stuck out as kind of a low point of the second half and maybe of the season as a whole. But that playoff series, I liked the way UMD played. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was watching on TV. You guys were there. But, I mean, I liked the compete level. I liked the fight that they showed. They lost to a team that now, I think is pretty well set up to make a run in the NCAA tournament. We'll see as we sit here recording. That
by the time the people listening
that might be
this,
a freezing cold take by the time this airs too, but because they play this afternoon. But I think St. Cloud's on an upward trajectory, and I like the way UMD played. They just lost, a couple really good hockey games on Saturday and Sunday. So nothing wrong with the way they ended the season and got ousted from the NCHC playoffs. But yeah, just the inconsistency throughout was really their Achilles heel from start to finish.
Yeah, I talked real briefly. We're recording this on Thursday, the 23rd. I talked to Scott on the 22nd. No, he was not aware of anyone on the 22nd entering the transfer portal that day when I talked to him. So it was just a brief chat. He was in Fargo. He's on the NCAA tournament committee. He's also there to watch his son, Ryan, who's in his last college career. So trying to let Scott be hockey dad as well for maybe the hockey dad. Katie's still going to be playing hockey, but for Ryan, a hockey dad for Ryan last couple weeks here. Hopefully Ryan can prove Zach wrong and end St. Cloud State's season and such and keep that career going because we all like Ryan and such. But the question I want to ask him is, and we've been asking him this for a couple of years now. I don't think I've done it every year that I've been on the beat, but what's the identity of this team? And I don't know if he's going to have an answer to that because I don't know what the identity of the 2022-23 Bulldogs are. I don't know if they ever quite figured it out, and that probably sums up why things didn't come together the way people hoped they would.
That's why we're here now and not in Fargo or Manch Vegas or wherever else the regionals are. Yeah.
All right. We're going to move on to the women, who had a much more exciting, though it ended in a disappointing fashion. The women, they went 26-10-3, were fourth in the WCHA in the regular season, lost in the WCHA final face-off semifinals to Ohio State, and were eliminated by Minnesota in an NCAA regional final. Did the UMD women meet your expectations, exceed them, or underperform to date? Zach, I'll let you start on this one.
Well, the women, I think, were in a different situation to start than the men. Anybody who is probably realistic about where the men started this year, we're going to say, we don't like to use the term rebuilding, but we're in a different spot as far as expectations go. Players and coaches in the building will tell you expectations are always NCAA tournament national championship, but the women had realistic expectations to be in the Frozen Four for a third straight year, to hopefully win a national championship and break through that door that they had been knocking on the last couple seasons. And honestly, with those expectations set, which I think were very realistic and very honest about the way this team's framework was made up, they underperformed. They didn't meet those expectations. Not only were they not in the Frozen Four or in the national championship game in their own building, but when you look at their record against the Minnesotas, Wisconsins, Ohio States, the teams that were part of that conversation, and 3 of the 4 teams in the Frozen Four, they did not play well enough to get results. And a couple of those games are like the men. They played well in some of those games, 1-goal losses, a couple of them in overtime, but you have to get results against those teams. That's your competition. And when you measure UMD's season against those 3 teams in particular, UMD did not have the year that it wanted, for sure.
If we're going to be that simplistic about it, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I would agree. I don't think it's fair to levy a national championship expectation on anybody. I don't care how good a team is. It's too hard to win 3 or 4 games in a single elimination tournament. It just is. You could have the stacked roster of all stacked rosters. It does not matter. I think they met expectations, barely, because I agree with you. I think the difference in their season being a good season and being a potentially great season, legendary season, the stuff that banners are made of, is the fact that they didn't get those results against those teams throughout the season. And it wasn't like they didn't play well. They weren't competitive. All the 1-goal losses to Ohio State, right there with Wisconsin in those home games, right there basically every game against the Gophers. But if I'm going to say I don't put national championship expectations on a team, the fact that they were a win away from the Frozen Four tells me that they met expectations, just in all fairness.
I think this is an example, the UMD women and the Minnesota Gophers women, and even the Ohio State women. I think this is an area where you can say you didn't meet expectations, but you still had a good season. Like 3 out of 4 teams in the WCHA did not meet their
right.
The Wisconsin Badgers, who ultimately won the national championship, even they, none of us had them picked to be, everyone, we all talked about Gophers, Bulldogs, Buckeyes because they had all the fifth-year seniors coming back and were, reloaded, recharged from a year ago. I think everyone had the Badgers maybe as fourth on the list of winning that national championship. In the WCHA, like those four teams, it's national championship or bust. I think it was this year, even for the Badgers. You could maybe say the Badgers exceeded their expectations. But yeah, I don't think the UMD women met their expectations. And I'm not saying they had to win a national championship to meet those, though I think that's what they were. It was all or nothing. I think for them, they really wanted to play in the Frozen Four at home, even though they downplayed it throughout the entire year. So yeah, I don't think they met expectations. And this team honestly wasn't as good as last year's team. Yes, Ashton Bell came back. Emma Soderberg was just ridiculous and had a phenomenal season. Defensively, I think the UMD women were a much stronger team this year on the back end and in goal. They just didn't have the offensive punch. They were missing. They maybe didn't need Anna Klein and Elizabeth Giguere, but they needed one or the other. I feel like they just needed that one more piece. They were one, top high-end scorer, a Lara Stalder, I throw in that card. They were that person away from maybe going over the top and being in the Frozen Four and maybe winning a national title. I mean, that Buckeyes team was loaded. That Gophers team was loaded. In a 7-game series, I don't think the Wisconsin Badgers are taken down, are winning that national championship. But in the one and done of an NCAA tournament, you just never know what's going to happen. So, yeah, the UMD, where we looked at the men and said they didn't meet expectations and this was a disappointing year, I don't think you can say the UMD women didn't meet expectations, but I thought it was a good year. It was a fun year to watch that team. They were enjoyable to watch. It was a heck of a run to go on.
I would say two things. One, they made very few mistakes, and there were a bunch of times they couldn't outscore those, which tells you that they were missing, like Matt said, that high-end offensive player that they did have last year and didn't have this year. And two, Wisconsin was the number 6 seed. Before they expanded this tournament, Wisconsin would have been sweating on championship weekend, whether or not there would be enough automatic bids that might get them out of the tournament, depending on how the other conferences played out. And now they're celebrating a national championship. Thank heavens they expanded this tournament.
Yeah, and one game doesn't define a season, right? I mean, if UMD wins that game, the regional final against Minnesota, and makes the Frozen Four, it's so easy to say, oh, you met your expectations, you got to the Frozen Four. Even if they lose in the semifinals, don't get to the national championship or don't win it. It's just such a different perception. But when you look at, I think, the games against those top teams overall, the Minnesota, the Wisconsin, the Ohio State, the top half of the WCHA, UMD did not have the results that it would want, and it finished in 4th place. Again, not because it played poorly, but just because those are 3 really good hockey teams. And so it's hard to take away from what those 3 have done. But for UMD to say, I think, hey, this was a successful season, you need to be 500 or better against those teams.
Sure. Well, they did win the regular season series against the Badgers.
I know. I'm just saying those 3 combined.
The team they really struggled against was Minnesota. Was Minnesota.
0-5 and didn't lead for a second.
And Minnesota you want to talk about a team that didn't meet expectations? It's that one. And you're right, Zach. It's possibly one game for the Gophers. They lost one overtime game to the Badgers, and the perception is that their season was a total failure.
Wisconsin had to play 2 nearly perfect hockey games in Duluth and did it.
Yeah. And I get what you're saying, and I hate it. I do. Because I think back to 2011, and you weren't in the business, I don't think, yet.
I was.
Were you at 2011? Where were you in 2011 when
KBJR?
When the men won their first title?
I was at KBJR because I was 3rd man on the totem pole. So Tom Hansen and Joe Dufek were in St. Paul, and I was running the board back in Duluth.
So that Thursday, the semifinal Thursday, North Dakota lost to Michigan 2-0 because Sean Hunwick would not allow North Dakota to score. He was incredible that night. And I will remember till I'm dead, the North Dakota players up at the podium after that game, and they refused to say that their season was a success. You guys, you won your league, regular season, and I think they won the playoff title. They got to the Frozen Four, and their season was a failure because they didn't win a national championship. And I've hated that for those guys, that anybody would allow themselves to put that kind of expectation on themselves, that you're going to coast through a single elimination tournament where literally every one of the 16 teams in it can win. If you don't win it, you're a failure. I hate that. I hate it. Again, you're doing it to yourself, so I get that. But the Gophers had a great team that just they ran into a team that played a little better that night. And by the way, Wisconsin had to play better because they weren't a better team.
Well, and let's be clear here. They might have used it in 2011 when talking about that North Dakota team. We're not using that word here talking about this year's UMD team.
No,
We're
not at
being
all.
very clear. Meets expectations, doesn't meet expectations is a completely different thing from successful season, failure of a season. I don't think at all it was a failure of a season.
I'm
for
just
UMD.
saying.
I don't think anybody should.
I'm just saying that I don't like when we put those kind of expectations on athletes because all it does is feed that. And then when you lose early, that's what you're going to get called. It's not fair. It really isn't. The Gophers aren't a failure. The Bulldogs aren't a failure. The Buckeyes aren't a failure. Wisconsin won. It happens. But all four of those teams were very good teams that were capable of winning a national championship.
Cammy Cronish, that name's going to stick with me for forever. What a playoff.
What a performance.
What a playoff run. All right, for the men, who was your MVP this season? Zach?
It's Ben Steeves or Wyatt Kaiser. I don't know if you can pick between them.
You have to pick one.
I have to pick one.
Yeah, so I could pick the other.
Okay. I'll say Wyatt Kaiser then is the MVP. I mean, he doesn't get a lot of the headlines, certainly on the stat sheet, but what he did for the team and the minutes that he ate up and really solidified a defensive core that is now, with him gone and a couple others as well, is just going to have a lot of holes to fill. And so we'll see what the team does in the transfer portal, if anything, on that back end, but he'll be sorely missed for sure.
Bruce, you're going to go with Ben Steeves then?
Yeah, and I'll say Ben Steeves because it's hard to score goals in this sport, and he scored 21 of them as a freshman. I don't care if they were every one of them was a 5-on-3 goal with the net empty. It doesn't matter. He scored 21 goals in his freshman year. That's pretty impressive at this level. And there were a lot of games where it felt like he was scoring. It wasn't just he was scoring goals. He was scoring big goals. I think about that Denver game out there where they won 6-5, and it was the eventual game winner, but it was also a momentum turning goal because Denver had everything going at that point. Ben Steeves scores on the power play, and UMD was able to settle kind of back into its game. They got scrambly there for a bit. They settled down and played much better the rest of the game after he got on that goal. So I would also give a nod. He's not the MVP of the team, the Carter-Loney. Not an offensively productive guy, but a guy that centered a middle six line the entire season, and he has centered a line now 2 years in a row. He's gotten better at that position. He's gotten better on faceoffs, and the other part of it is that was him with Quinn Olson and Kyle Bettens. That was the most consistent line UMD had 5-on-5 the second half of the season. So he's got to get a nod here as well.
All right, so it's either Steeves or Kaiser. Kaiser was... I think I'm going to give it to Kaiser because I just think he really was. The times I'd run into him behind the scenes, like the passion he had for this season. I think if he was back, he might have been wearing the C. Maybe you could have given him a letter even this year. Like, that kid grinded. You could tell as the year went along what guys really wanted to get better too. Because I had mentioned this early in the year. Wyatt Kaiser, after a game, did this like insane. He doesn't think it's insane. I thought it was.
I think what he does on the ice is insane sometimes.
He puts in all these minutes, and then he would do these like long, elaborate post-game workouts. And I noticed this because you go around a corner, and I'd sometimes tell him to, go do your workout before coming to talk to me after the game. And sometimes I had to wait a while for him to do the workout. He just put in so much work. He was just a grinder. I know everyone would have liked to see him be more offensive. I don't know if he is that type of defenseman. I think he is a bit of a puck mover, but not like a Scott Perenovich scoring. Like, the problem with Wyatt Kaiser, as we look back on his career, is he had to follow Scott Perenovich. So everyone wanted to ask, who's Scott Perenovich leaves, and okay, who's going to be the next Scott Perenovich? And immediately we decided it was going to be Wyatt Kaiser. And that probably wasn't a fair comparison because Wyatt's just a different type of defenseman. But the minutes he put in, especially early in the season when this team really needed, they got better at defense on the blue line as the year went along. But like, he carried that team early on in the year. And when he, took that dumb high sticking penalty that he himself will call dumb and was gone for a game, you could see how badly they missed him back there. I'm going to give Wyatt Kaiser as that MVP, with Ben Steeves as a close second, because when we talk about the women and that offensive weapon that they were missing, like, Ben Steeves was the offensive weapon. I think, man, if he had been at UMD a year early. Now, there's no guarantee he's going to score like he did now. That second year juniors really helped him find his offensive touch. Like, last year's team, could have used Ben Steeves late in the game against Denver in Loveland to tie that game up and possibly give him a win. So yeah, Kaiser. I think Kaiser's going to be my guy here.
Two words come to mind when I think about Perunovic and then the transition to Kaiser, and that's generational talent. And there's a reason why the term exists, generational talent. There shouldn't be one on your team every year. There shouldn't be one in the NHL draft every year. That's why everybody's tanking for Connor Bedard, because he's truly a generational talent. Scott Perunovic at this level was a generational talent. You're not going to replace him with another one. And again, we talk about expectations, and I tried really hard to temper that when he left and Kaiser came in, because you have no idea how hard it is to play the game the way Scott Perunovic played the game. And the fact that he played it that way doesn't mean somebody else is going to be able to do it. And Kaiser came in and I think began to recognize what he was, which is not an offensive defenseman. He's not going to score 15, 20 goals in a season, but he's a guy that can move the puck. He's a tremendous skater. He's a good, hard defender. And he began, I felt, to embrace those things as the season went on. He got better for it, and that's why he's in the NHL now.
All right, this last one before we take a break is probably going to be really easy. Who's your MVP for the UMD women? Bruce, you get to start on this one.
Can I pick Emma Soderberg then?
As long as I don't have to pick after you. And
well, you are, because I'm going first.
Well, but I know, but I can pick the same person, right?
We can all pick the same person on this.
Oh, that's no fun.
As long as I have to pick somebody different, go ahead, pick whoever you want.
It's Emma Soderberg. And yeah, like I said earlier, I didn't think that this team made a lot of mistakes. And when it did, she was way more often than not there to cover those mistakes as the last line of defense. You could see the trust they had in her and the trust she had in them. And that's a special thing when you have that on a team. So, yeah, Emma Soderberg, to me, it's not even close.
Yeah, for a team that didn't score as much as the team that they've had the past couple of years when they've been, specifically last year when they got to the national championship game, you need good goaltending. And the women this year is funny because I feel like as far as statistical output or how they were winning games, it was really, really similar to the men's model when they were winning national championships is, hey, if we can get to 2 goals, we're going to probably win the game. And if we can get to 3, we're for sure going to win the game. And that's the goaltender that she was. And, we heralded Hunter Shepard in his run on the men's side, and we should do the same for Emma Soderberg. She's, rewritten her name all over the record books. And she's another one that I don't know who's going to be the starting goaltender next year for UMD at this point for on the women's side or on the men's side, I guess, for that matter, too. But please don't put the pressure on them to beat Emma Soderberg right out of the gate or ever. She might be another one of those generational talents that Bruce was talking about.
Yeah, and Emma just kept getting better and better and better every year. And this goes back to, UMD kind of knew what we're all asking, like, oh, wow, you got to replace Maddie Rooney. How are you going to do that? They already knew what they had. Like, it'd be crazy to think what Emma Soderberg, if she had another year, we often joke about this with the Hunter Shepard brought it up himself, right? Like, man, if Scott hadn't played me in those 5 games my freshman year, I could have come back. Those 5 games actually cost Shep 2 seasons because of COVID and everything. But yeah, Soderberg, man, she was a game changer. She was just such a game changer for them. And it took some ridiculous goals by the Gophers in that regional game to finally beat her. That was the only team that had the talent and firepower in the country to really take her down throughout the year, and she was magnificent. That was a fun storyline to watch. I wasn't sure when the season started. You saw where she was, that she'd need 10 shutouts to break a single season record, which was Kayla Black. That 10 shutouts in a season is ridiculous. Soderberg posts 12, and then the career shutout record, I didn't think that was in grasp either, and she just got on a roll. And Zach says 2 to 3 goals to win. Man, Emma played so well, you just needed 1 goal some nights for them to get the win. So easy pick there, Emma Soderberg. We're gonna miss her, especially because she gave me great advice on this podcast on how to pack crowlers in a check bag. So I'll always be thankful for Emma for that advice. All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more with Bruce and Zach. You're listening to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health.
Greetings from Northlandia, a place to bring your curiosity, because here you will find curiosities. Whether it's a look inside the Northern Rail train car inn or an introduction to Duluth's musical roboticist Robot Rickshaw, we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. Each week, I'm joined by my fellow reporters who share the unique and fascinating stories that they discover while exploring the Northland. You can find new episodes of the Northlandia podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Join us along this journey and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss if you're not in the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.
Hi, I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Explore Superior and Douglas County history with me on Archive Dive, a monthly podcast available at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. They're proud to be the team physicians for the UMD Bulldogs and provide sports medicine care to more than 25,000 student athletes in the community to ensure they can compete at the highest level while protecting their long-term health and athletic futures. Thanks to Essentia Health for their support of the Bulldog Insider Podcast. I'm Matt Wellens, along with Zach Schneider and Bruce Ciskie. Again, we're running through, kind of wrapping up the season here. These may or may not be quick hitters to close out the podcast. We'll see. Let's start with biggest surprise this year, the men's team. Who is the biggest surprise? Zach?
Well, if you could pick a trio, the fourth line, freshman line really came on and was arguably UMD's most consistent and maybe its best line over the last month and a half of the season. But individually, I think Kyle Bettens. Surprise always depends on where your level of expectation comes in. But the way that he played through the second half of the season, I think he became one of the more consistent forwards that they had and learned how to play within the system. And I guess I was surprised, how much use he got in the last month and a half, 2 months of the season in some pretty big situations, and I'm looking forward to seeing that growth in the next year.
I was really hoping you wouldn't say him, but in the spirit of being different, I'm going to say Joey Pierce, because I felt like he started all right, and he was playing that steady Eddie simple defensive game. He ended up being scratched for the better part of a month, I think it was, there for a bit as they were shuffling 13 forwards for a good chunk of time there. And then he became one of their top six defensemen again down the stretch, and I thought played very well, accounted very well for himself. He became a fixture on the penalty kill. Again, simple defensive game. You could see that the footwork for him is going to have to get better, but that's what the summer's for. And I think you'll see him come back a stronger player, but he should have gone into the offseason with a lot of confidence based on how he played down the stretch. And I wasn't sure what to expect out of him, and I thought that they have a little bit better defensive play than what they got, and they didn't get that. Down the stretch, he gave them some quality that they really needed back there.
Man, I thought Joey Pierce was going to be a sleeper. Like Kyle Bettens is Kyle Bettens far exceeded my expectations. Like I thought that was going to be a fourth line grinder freshman. I didn't expect him to be up there with Carter Loney and Quinn Olson, which we should preface. As much as I liked Carter Loney, I thought Bruce nailed on the head earlier, like he's a solid third line center. You had a lot of lines on UMD playing up a spot this year. I mean, that freshman line of Jack Smith, Cole Spicer, and Isaac Howard, that was their top line in that last game against St. Cloud. And I say that because Brett Larson was matching his top line against that line all night. That's who he was throwing out there trying to slow down. So, all right, to be different, I'm going to try and be different here. I'm going to go Cole Spicer. Like that was a late addition. He was rejected by North Dakota. They decided he had to go back to juniors, and Cole didn't want to go back to juniors. So he gets picked up by UMD. They let him come in and play as a freshman. And I wasn't sure what I thought. This is a long-term play, right? Like Cole, I trust Brad Berry. If he thinks that Cole Spicer probably needs to go back to juniors another year, that probably means Cole Spicer could have benefited from he came out of the development program, so it would have been a year of juniors. But I thought Cole acclimated himself really well. I thought he embraced his role. He didn't seem to be a guy that expected to be a top line player or anything. When Scott moved him to wing, he seemed cool about that. Whether that was at the beginning of the year, even later in the year, as Jack Smith got healthy. I thought Cole Spicer was definitely a surprise, and I think he's a good building block moving forward for the freshmen. Like when you look at the freshmen who we thought we were going to make immediate impacts, it was going to be Ben Steeves, just because of the experience he brought from juniors and how many goals he had put up there. And then we thought Isaac Howard was going to be an impact freshman, at least in the second half. And yeah, I thought Cole Spicer was right up there. Cole Bettens and Jack Smith was another guy that was pretty good at the end of the year too, after missing some time. So it was interesting to see how this freshman class turned out and the guys that did make impacts. So who was the biggest surprise on the women's team this year? Is it Emma Soderberg? Because we knew she was going to be good, but nobody could have expected that, break the career and single season shutouts record. Good. No, we have to say someone. Then I'll start this one. Mary Kate O'Brien was a player who barely played as a freshman. She had battled injuries, and she came on late in the year and played key roles. When Kylie Hanley was out, she stepped in. I mean, she was no Kylie Hanley, but she was still pretty solid. I mean, Mary Kate O'Brien was a player that I definitely became a factor late in the year for the UMD women. And man, I wouldn't have even thought that at the beginning of the season.
I'm going to say Nina Jobe-Smith. I thought last year when Maggie Flaherty went down, her and Taylor Stewart formed a very solid defensive pair that gave quality minutes in some big spots because they really needed that. This year, I felt like she took a jump offensively. We always knew she had the skill. It was a matter of seeing it out there on the ice, and she finally had an opportunity to do that, and she took full advantage of it. Offensively had a great year, and she didn't give up a ton of what she had learned defensively either. I thought she had a very good year, impactful, and I would say she was probably, because of the contributions we saw offensively, I think she was the biggest surprise they had.
I'll go with Madden McMahon then, mainly because of the offensive contribution she was able to make from the second line for UMD this year, which was big in some of those games, against some of the top teams who have a lot of depth and have a lot of high-end scoring. We knew whoever was going to replace Anna Klein and Elizabeth Jaguar on the top line alongside Gabby Hughes were probably going to have increased production because of the player that Gabby is, and Ani Linser and Taylor Anderson definitely did that. They pulled their weight this year. But Madden McMahon helped solidify a second offensive line for UMD, and that was important in a lot of those games, that they could roll out two forward lines that realistically could score on every shift.
Zach's answer transitions into my next one, and we're going to start with the women instead of the men on this one. Who is the most important player returning for the UMD women next year? I'm going to say it's Madden McMahon, because that's going to be your top line center for the Bulldogs next year. Yeah, she was great. She took her game to another level, and I thought she was good. Again, back in Erie, Mannon was tackled. I'm going to start that hashtag whenever we look back at the 2021 UMD women's hockey season there in the corner against Northeastern in that Frozen Four semifinal. You've seen her take pretty big steps, I feel like, every year. And man, her speed and ability to move that puck up through the zone, if they can get the right offensive weapons, if some people can take some steps for the UMD women next year, I think Mannon's going to be a game changer and a dangerous player. And that's what that team needs, because I think they're still, even though they're losing Ashton Bell, Maggie Flaherty, Emma Soderberg, what they have coming in, I think UMD's still going to be, the women are going to be strong on the back end, but they need someone to take that offense to another level. And I think Mannon is that player.
I would probably have said Madden McMahon in the spirit of again trying to be different. I'm going to say Mary Kate O'Brien, because again, the strength of this team is down the middle. And Maura Kroll talked about the importance of having that strength, and that's where you're losing your top three centers. Well, Madden gives you one, Mary Kate O'Brien gives you two, and I thought she really gave them some quality down the stretch. And I'll throw a bone in there for Haley McLeod as well, because Ev Gascon is coming in here with a lot of expectations, but again, a lot of those expectations are going to be unfair. And Haley McLeod has played in this league. She knows this league a little bit. She's a capable goaltender, and I think she's going to be asked to take some of the pressure off of Ev Gascon as she continues that transition, learning this language, learning the college game, and hopefully that's a tandem that they can ride in the first half of the season at the minimum next year.
Yeah, I think Nina Jobe-Smith falls into this category as well, right? Because she's probably going to be asked to play top pair minutes alongside whoever her partner ends up being, but she's going to have to fill the role of a Maggie Flaherty and an Ashton Bell, at least on the line chart. Maybe not exactly the role that they played on the ice, because as we've talked about, they're different players, but she's going to play more and in more situations, and she's taken steps in that direction to be ready for it, and so she'll be important to this team next year as well.
Who is the most important player returning for the UMD men? We know who it won't be.
Yeah, Wyatt Kaiser.
Ouch.
That's not who he was talking about, by the way.
Who is Bruce? You get to start. Who is the most important player returning for the UMD men?
That's a tough one, boy. I'm gonna go with Blake Biondi, because you need more than one guy that can score goals. And Ben Steves has proven he can score goals. So Blake Biondi, a healthy Blake Biondi, and I don't care what anybody says. If your left shoulder's bad enough that you eventually need to get it cut on, but it doesn't get cut on until your right shoulder's bad enough that it has to be cut on, and you play half a season with a bad left shoulder, I'm sorry. There's no way it doesn't impact your game a little bit. I'm expecting a stronger, healthy, and motivated Blake Biondi next season, and I think that's going to make a lot of difference for this team, whatever it ends up looking like once this offseason, this third season is done.
Yeah, I don't want to take all the answers. I got a couple things here, but Ben Steves is in the Blake Biondi boat. And hopefully Ben stays healthy, unlike Blake in the first half, because Blake didn't have the first half that he would have liked or what would have been expected after his kind of breakout offensive season last year. Well, Ben's had his breakout offensive season. Now his challenge is, can you repeat it? I mean, scoring 21 goals in this league, it shouldn't go overlooked and it shouldn't be minimized, but can you do that again? Even something close to it? Can you get 15, 16, 17 goals? Can you score more 5-on-5 goals? His challenge is now you're not a secret anymore. People are going to know about you, and can you replicate that kind of success? So, if they can find that 1-2 punch with Steves and Biondi, they might be all right.
I'm going to go in goal, and this is an area that there's some question mark going into the offseason. Matthew Thiessen can come back for a sixth year if he and UMD want him to. We don't know if that's going to happen yet. There's Adam Guyon, currently playing down the road in Chippewa Falls in the North American League. Played pretty well with the Green Bay Gamblers. Had a phenomenal World Juniors. He's probably going to get drafted if he's a goalie and gets drafted. And either way, UMD may be bringing him in next year. But I think Ev Gascon, Maura Kroll tried to give me the pronunciation yesterday, and I'm just not good at it. Apparently it's not Eve. My apologies. It's Ev. She's from Quebec, French. Go back to an episode of Tanner Latteroux to get an insight into my inability to pronounce the French language. This is where we miss Sam, our French and outdoors expert. Not trying to diminish your contributions or anything here, Wyatt, but
sound like you kind of were.
We appreciate you, Wyatt, so much.
Wyatt might be in the transfer portal.
Wyatt might be heading in the transfer portal in between episodes here. No, I don't think you can expect a freshman goaltender, no matter how highly touted they are, to come in and make an immediate impact. I know Hunter Miska did it in his one season at UMD, but those players are rare, as Miska went on and was one and done and went to the got an NHL deal and such. I think Zach Stejskal, I still believe Zach Stejskal has not had the last 2 years. We haven't seen, again, we talk about Blake Biondi going through shoulder surgery. Zach Stejskal went through cancer, death facing, I know the recovery rates and for that, his type of cancer are, especially because he caught it as soon as he did, are pretty good, but it's still cancer. Like, the dude had cancer, and we saw him his freshman year, the potential, and I still think and believe that's there. If Zach Stejskal can get back to that freshman Zach Stejskal, the pre-cancer, get back to that level, and you maybe have Adam Guyon coming in and playing at a high level. If they have that goaltending punch again, man, I think then the sky is the limit for the Bulldogs, because that's really been the key. They've never been a high scoring team. Like, anyone who, I know there's a lot of doom and gloom over Isaac Howard right now leaving, but like, the Bulldogs haven't won national championships because they put up 5-6 goals a game and had all these 50-point scores and 30 goals scores and everything like that. They did it because they had the best goaltending. So Zach Stejskal, man, I'd love, that'd be a great story to see him come back. And if he plays like he did his freshman year, that'll be the end. We won't see Zach Stejskal back for a sixth year. He's going to sign an NHL deal. There's a lot of talent there, and I hope we see it from Zach. All right, let's truly wrap this up, because this one has gone long. We have another episode to get to. The last question, guys, give me your Amsoil Arena all-concession food team for the 2022-23 season. We're going to pick 3 and name an MVP. Bruce, you get to start, because we're going to make fun of your lame.
Right, yeah, we won't be repeating any of yours.
We're not going to repeat any of yours. Zach and I might conflict here. Bruce, you start. What were your top 3 Amsoil Arena concession foods?
So my son put me on the pizza, which they must have changed something, because the pizza was actually pretty good.
Are you talking about like the special edition pizzas they were doing, or did you try any of the new ones?
Are you kidding me?
cheese.
What do I
pizza.
look like to you?
I know. It was a hope. It was a wish that maybe
No.
maybe you tried the breakfast pizza, which made a comeback during the Frozen Four. Thank you, Jerry. That was phenomenal.
Yeah, I wish I had actually tried that. I like
breakfast pizza was really good. Yeah.
No, I think, and you could go pepperoni, you could go cheese, whatever you want to do. I don't care. The grilled cheese with chicken was a game changer.
I'll give you that one.
That made the food rotation. That will, if it's back next year, that will stay in the food rotation. And the burger and fries for me, they're always a go-to.
You
But
get three. Okay.
yeah, the grilled chicken is the MVP.
The
grilled cheese with chicken, I should say.
Okay, so so cheeseburger, grilled cheese with chicken. What's your third
Pizza.
pick? And pizza.
Yeah.
Okay, I just forgot about pizza because it was Zach.
Save us.
Save this segment, please.
As soon as I saw
At
this
least you didn't say chicken strips.
No, as soon as I saw this question on the rundown, I knew we were in trouble. Yeah. Well, not we, I.
The MVP is probably the toughest one for me. I'll probably just go with the one I ordered the most this season, which would, I guess, have to be your MVP. But the loaded mac and cheese with the porchetta, the poutine, and I like the spinach artichoke grilled cheese, which was the one I ordered the most. So that'll be my MVP.
Spinach artichoke grilled cheese. Man, that was delicious. That was really good. That's on my list. The poutine is just a go-to for me. It's so good. And I ripped on this during the preview that they did of the new food at Amsoil this year. I completely discounted it, and I don't know if it was that day I just got a bad sample, but it turned out to be my go-to throughout the entire season. Jeff Stark was there with me. Every time we'd be like, oh, we're going to try something different. And we went right back to it. Sirloin stacker. The sirloin stacker. I ate the sirloin stacker so much. Again, sirloin stacker, no onions. That the guy who cooked it at almost every game, had it ready for me, knew it was coming. I ate that sandwich so much this year. It was so good. The sirloin stacker was my MVP.
That's steak, Bruce.
I'm aware, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure.
I know
if
how
you
that
had
works. Yeah.
Branched out to that genre.
Yeah.
All right. That's all the time we have to mock Bruce's culinary choices on the Bulldog Insider Podcast this week. This is part 1 of our 2-part season finale. Watch for part 2 in your podcast feed, where we're going to talk more about recruiting, the transfer portal, maybe give you a sneak peek at next season's schedule as well. We can maybe hint at the teams that are going to be on there. We don't have the exact dates or anything because apparently that's still in flux. I know that's all everyone wants to, even though Isaac Howard has entered the transfer portal. I know everyone still is like, oh, that's great. Can you give me the schedule, Matt? We'll worry about Isaac and all that later. Bulldog Insider Podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and rate us. For more Bulldogs hockey coverage, visit therinklive.com and DuluthNewsTribune.com. Thanks to our sponsor, Essentia Health, for their continued support of the Bulldog Insider Podcast. And thanks to all of you for listening.